Hi, today we'll be discussing about vectors, vector part 1. In this section I'll be covering the introduction of vector, addition and subtraction of vectors, and vectors in a Cartesian plane. So let's go to the intro of vectors. Vectors are used in physics mostly, and let's see, we have displacement and velocity. Velocity and speed are different. Velocity is only having the magnitude while speed is only having the magnitude while velocity is having its magnitude and direction, as you know. So what are vectors? Vectors are a quantity that has both magnitude and direction. You have to highlight here the magnitude and direction. So now let's look here. For example, you have vector. For example, you are moving to a direction from A to B. So and B to A. The direction from A to B and B to A are the opposite direction, but you have to remember that A to B and B to A has the same magnitude. So now for example, let's have the magnitude of vector AB, that means from here to here the magnitude is 2, and now vector BA is the opposite direction of vector AB. So look at here, so I'm adding a negative here because it's the opposite direction of AB. So BA is the opposite direction of AB. Please remember that it is the opposite direction, so I have added a negative there. So since I have had a negative there, so its vector is also going to be -2. So you can understand now that why do we have to add a negative here, because it's the opposite direction. So now let's solve a problem. Okay, so we have here AB, vector AB, vector CD, vector AC, and vector BD and vector AD. So let's look here. CD and AB, vector CD and vector AB are equivalent to 5x, while vector BD and vector AC are equivalent to 2y. So now the question is find vector AD. So it's like this. How do we solve this problem? We could either go from A, B, D or A, C, D. It is not necessary you have to follow a path to find our answer to reach AD. It's like this. Ali is going to Daniel's house. Ali over here is going to Daniel's house. He could either pass Chandru's house and go to Daniel's house, or Ali could use Balu house towards Daniel's house. And that's how you're going to find a direct path from Ali's house to Daniel's house. So let me show how do we do this question. So to reach Ali from Ali's house to Daniel's house, you have to pass through Balu's house first. Ali has to go to Balu's house first, and from Balu's house you have to go to Daniel's house. We could do this question by even going from Ali's house to Chandru's house, and from Chandru's house to Daniel's house. So I have only just did one part, which is from Ali house to Balu house and from Balu house to Daniel house. So AB plus BD will be getting 5x plus 2y. So as from algebra, you know that different terms should not be adding together, so these are two different terms. And you could also try to do that AC plus CD, you will be getting the same answer. So now look at this question. It's the same as the previous question, but only thing I've changed now is the direction of vector, and this vector is not pointing as the previous vector from C to D. It is pointing from D to C. So it's the opposite direction of A to B. As I told you that A to B and C to D share the same vector, which is 5x. So now that A to B is already 5x, but as the previous one I said that the C to D is 5x. Now it's from D to C, it should be the opposite direction, so you should have a negative in front. So now let's solve this question AC. I think you know the answer for AC is 2y, but I will show you another way how to solve this question. So every time when you face a problem in vectors, think like this: you're going from one place to another place, and there are several ways to reach that part, but the final answer, the final distance is going to be the same. So now the question is how to go from Ali's house to Chandru's house. So I have two ways. One is going from Ali house to Balu house, then to Balu house to Daniel house, from Daniel house to Chandru house. So I'm reaching my last destination is Chandru house. Always remember you have to start with what they have asked. For example, they are asking from vector AC. You have to start with A and end with C. So look here, I start with A and I ended with C. So somehow I have to end with C. And that's another one way. From Ali's house I can go to Daniel house, and from Daniel house to Chandru house. So I've done the this is the alternative way over here, from Ali house to Daniel house and from Daniel house to Chandru house. Okay, so now let's look here. I've done the part for the first part where we will go from Ali house to Balu house, and from Balu house to Daniel house, then from Daniel house we'll be going to Chandru house. Okay, now let's look. From Ali house to Balu house is 5x, and from Balu house to Daniel house is 2y. And now you know that DC over here is the opposite direction of the previous one, CD. So we have to add a negative here, negative 5x, and you'll get your final destination 2y. So if you also could try doing from Ali house to Daniel house and from Daniel house to Chandru house, you still be getting 2y. So now I hope you understand how do we do the addition and subtraction in vector. Let me remind you something. To reach, always remember you are reaching a destination in such questions. For example, I'm giving you AC. Remember you're going from Ali house to Chandru house. Don't complicate yourself. Just remember such easy things. I'm going from Ali's house to Chandru house. So I have lot of ways. Remember this way of doing this vector, it will be easy for you. So now I'll be talking about vector on a Cartesian plane. So normally you see in a Cartesian plane you'll be having I and J, which represent the X and Y. So the X and Y are normally in a graph X and Y. And have you ever noticed that whenever you are asked to draw a vector, you are given in this form X, Y. So X over here is, this may look like a coordinate. Normally you're given a coordinate X, Y, and when you're given a vector you're given in this form, so it's just the inverse of it. You always have to remember this, don't forget this. So now let's look how to find our magnitude, or normally we call it the resultant. Okay, so now let's look here. You always have to remember your Pythagoras theorem. Remember, a square plus b square equals to c square. So now for example, as I told you before, your x and y, or your I or your j, are going to represent this axis. Your x is going to represent the b and your y is going to represent the a. So you're going to find a resultant, which is c. So this is how you're going to find your c, is using your Pythagoras theorem, where a square plus b square equals to c square. So in order to find your c, you have to set or square root your a square plus b square. So you'll be finding your c, which is your resultant. In the case of force, maybe you have a force in direction of a, where it's pointing upwards, and b is pointing towards your right. So, and you may have c pointing towards here. So you may want to find what's your resultant. So this is how you're going to do a square plus b square with a set there, or square root. So by this you're going to find your resultant or your magnitude. This is how you're going to find your magnitude. So when it comes to unit vector, it's not so confusing. Your vector over here will be having an I, j, k, and your magnitude is just going to be a number. So by doing this, you're going to find your unit vector. So to end up this section, let's do a final question. So final question is find EB, E to B, while we know that A to B has the same distance with A to C, and we know that B to D and D to C is having the same vector, while E to C is 5x, and we know that BC is 2x plus 2y, and AB is equivalent to half BC. So now let's correct some part of the question. We know that AB, and AC have the same magnitude and direction. So now come to the part that AB is equivalent half to BC. So half of BC equals to x plus y. So AB is going to be x plus y and AC is going to be x plus y. And now for the part BD equals to BC. So we know that BC, look at over here, BC. So BD is the half of the fraction of BC. So BD is also going to be equivalent to x plus y, while DC is going to be x plus y too. And now we have EC, which is 5x. So I think so that we have solved most of the part of the question now. So the balance part is to find EB. So now I understand that you will understand how to do this question. So now let's wrap up our section for this vector. So once you have a vector, always remember, if you're confused, that you're moving from a house to a house, maybe from Ali house to Chandra house, or Chandra house to Daniel house. And remember that it's if it's at EB, if you ask you EB, remember you have to start with E and end with B. So now for example, they're asking me EB, E to B. I either could use two parts. One is from E to C, C to A to B. So I have to add in vector EC plus CA plus AB, or that's an alternative way. I can go through from EC, then from CD, and from D to B. So always remember, you have to not forget where you start and where you end. The same as displacement or force, just remember where you start and where you end. If you just remember this, vector will be much more easier. So now I've covered the addition, subtraction of a vector and the Cartesian spin of a vector. And the Cartesian, don't forget to add I, J. They are much more important. So that's all from me now. Thank you. Hope so. Please pass your comment down.